Welcome to Hearths of Myths. Today, the mist descends from the mountains, and the forest grows unnaturally quiet. We are walking the complete path of the shadow in the twilight, the Oni. Close your eyes, settle in, and let the darkness reveal its secrets. In the beginning, before the iron clubs and the tiger skin loincloths, before the horns that pierced the heavens and the fangs that tore through armor, there was only a feeling. It was not a monster that you could draw or sculpt. It was a sensation that prickled on the back of your neck when the sun dipped below the serrated ridges of the mountains. It was the sudden, unnatural silence that fell over a cedar forest, a heavy, suffocating quiet where the birds ceased their songs and the wind held its breath. In the archaic landscape of Japan, a land carved by volcanic fire and drowned in torrential rains, the world was a terrifyingly vast and unknowable place. Here, in the twilight of history, the seeds of the greatest nightmare in Japanese folklore were sown. To understand the Oni, we must first erase the image that comes to your mind. Forget the red giant guarding the gates of hell. That image is a later invention, a costume put on by a much older, much more elusive spirit. We must travel back 2,000 years, to a time when the Japanese archipelago was a patchwork of small kingdoms and wild, untamed frontiers. In this era, the boundaries between the human world, the world of rice paddies, thatched roofs, and fireside warmth, and the other world were perilously thin. The mountains were not just geological formations. They were the domain of the kami, the gods, and spirits that defied human understanding. And among these spirits, there were those that did not wish us well. The very word Oni is a ghost story in itself. Language is a kind of magic. It captures the essence of a thing, and the etymology of Oni leads us into the shadows. Scholars and linguists believe that the word is derived from the ancient syllable on, or onu, which carries the meaning to hide or to conceal. Think about that for a moment. The original name for the most terrifying monster in Japan did not mean strong or evil. It meant the hidden. They were the invisible ones. They were the mono, the things. In the ancient Japanese mindset, fear came from what you could not see. An Oni was not a creature that kicked down your door. It was the force that caused a sudden fever to sweep through your village. It was the invisible hand that pushed a traveler off a cliff path. It was the presence that you felt watching you from the deep shadows of a cave. But when you raised your torch, there was nothing there but cold stone. They were the chaotic, shapeless energies of the land itself, the malice of the wilderness that resented the encroachment of human civilization. Imagine the life of a person in the Yamato period. You live in a small settlement surrounded by dense, towering forests. The night is not merely dark, it is absolute. There are no streetlights, no glow of distant cities. When the sun sets, the world belongs to the On. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig could be one of them. They were the masters of the Ma, the negative space, the gap between the known and the unknown. This concept of the invisible threat is the primordial clay from which the Oni was sculpted. But as the centuries turned, this indigenous fear began to merge with ideas arriving from across the sea. From the great continent of China, ships brought silk, bronze mirrors, and something far more powerful, the written word. The Chinese characters, the kanji, carried with them the cosmology of a much older empire. And with these characters came the concept of the gui. In ancient China, the gui were the spirits of the dead. They were ghosts, the souls of ancestors who had not been properly honored, or the spirits of those who had died violent, tragic deaths. They were spectral, lingering in the world of the living to seek redress or simply to haunt. When the Japanese scribes adopted the Chinese writing system, they took the character for gui, a pictograph that looks eerily like a ghostly figure with a disproportionately large head and spindly legs, and they assigned it the reading Oni. This was a moment of profound alchemical transformation in mythology. The Japanese took their native concept of the invisible, chaotic nature spirits, the On, and fused it with the Chinese concept of the vengeful ghost, the gui. The result was something entirely new. The Oni began to drift between the two worlds. It acquired the terrifying potential of the ghost, the connection to death, to the grave, to the grudge, but it retained the raw, elemental power of the Japanese nature spirit. It was no longer just a bad wind. It was a bad wind with a consciousness. It was a storm that hated you. We can see this evolution unfolding in the earliest written records of Japan, the chronicles that sought to define the nation. In the Nihon Shoki, the chronicles of Japan completed in the year 720, the word Oni appears not just as a supernatural term, but as a political one. We must remember that history is written by the victors, and in ancient Japan, the victors were the imperial court in the Yamato region. As they expanded their borders, pushing north and west, they encountered indigenous tribes who refused to bow to the emperor. These people, who lived in the mountains, who worshipped the old gods of the earth, were alien to the refined courtiers of the capital. The chronicles describe these outsiders with dehumanizing language. They are called tsuchigumo, earth spiders. They are described as having long limbs, strange voices, and savage habits. In the eyes of the imperial court, these resistance fighters were not human. They were Oni. Here, the mythology takes a dark turn into the sociology of fear. The other, the foreigner, the barbarian, the person who does not look like us or speak like us, becomes the monster. There is a chilling account in the Nihon Shoki from the reign of Emperor Kinmei, around the year 544. It tells of a group of beings called the Mishihase, who arrived on Sado Island. The text is sparse, but the horror is palpable. The local islanders were terrified of these strangers. They called them Oni. They refused to approach them, refused to treat them as kin. The story ends in tragedy and abduction, a collision of cultures interpreted through the lens of demonology. The Oni was the face given to the xenophobia of an isolated island nation. It was the embodiment of the anxiety that arises when the known world is invaded by the unknown. But it is in the Fudoki, the ancient gazetteers that catalog the local legends and geography of the provinces, that we find one of the first, truly terrifying descriptions of an Oni manifesting in physical form. The Izumo no Kuni Fudoki, compiled in the year 713, takes us to the misty province of Izumo, a place steeped in the oldest Shinto myths. The text tells the story of a simple farmer, a man of the soil, who was plowing his field in a quiet valley. It was a day like any other, the smell of wet earth in the air, the rhythmic sound of the hoe striking the ground. But then, the silence was shattered. The text describes a being, a one-eyed Oni, that descended upon the man. It does not describe a duel. It does not describe a conversation. It describes a consumption. The Oni snatched the man up and devoured him. When the man's son, who had been working nearby, looked for his father, there was nothing left. No body to bury, no bones to mourn over, just the empty field and the silence of the valley. This story marks a pivotal shift. The Oni is no longer just a presence that causes illness. It has become a predator. The detail of the one eye is significant. In many cultures, the cyclopean eye represents a lack of perspective, a singular, destructive focus. It represents a being that cannot see the nuance of the human world, only its own hunger. This one-eyed Oni of Izumo is the grandfather of the monsters we will meet later. It is the raw, unpolished nightmare, a force that comes out of nowhere, eats the living, and vanishes back into the mist. As we move from the Archaic Period into the Heian Period, the golden age of classical Japanese culture, the shadow of the Oni grew longer and more distinct. This was an era of elegance, of poetry, of silk robes and perfumed courts. But beneath the veneer of sophistication, the capital city of Kyoto was a place of deep, trembling superstition. The people of the Heian period lived in a world where the supernatural was as real as the weather. The darkness of the Heian night was profound. There was a belief that at twilight, the hour of the rooster, the boundary between the worlds dissolved. This time was known as Omagatoki, the time of meeting disaster. It was the time when the Oni walked the streets. Stories from this era, collected in anthologies like the Nihon Ryoiki, speak of a terror known as Oni Hitokuchi, Oni in one bite. These are tales that haunt the imagination because of their suddenness. A young man might be walking with a beautiful woman he has just met. They step into the shadows of a pine tree for a moment of privacy. A scream is cut short. When the man steps out, or when passers-by investigate, the woman is gone. She has been eaten in a single gulp. No blood, no struggle, just a total erasure from existence. Consider the psychological weight of this myth. In a time when life was fragile, when plagues could wipe out half a family in a week, when fires consumed wooden cities in a night, the Oni in one bite was a metaphor for the precariousness of life. It was the void that opened up beneath your feet. The Oni was the agent of loss. It was the thief of futures. At this stage in history, the Oni were still shapeshifters. They were master illusionists. They could appear as your brother, your wife, or a helpless child crying by the roadside. They used your own compassion against you. This added a layer of paranoia to the fear. The Oni was not just a monster in a cave. It could be the person standing next to you. It was the hidden evil within the human heart, masked by a pleasant face. We also see the emergence of the connection between the Oni and the angry spirit, or Goryo. The Heian court was a viper's nest of political intrigue. Nobles were exiled, poisoned, or forced to commit suicide. The belief was strong that these wronged spirits would return as Oni to wreak vengeance upon the living. The most famous of these is perhaps the spirit of Sugawara no Michizane, a scholar and statesman who died in exile. After his death, the capital was struck by lightning storms, plagues, and the sudden deaths of his political enemies. The people whispered that he had become the thunder god, a powerful, lightning-wielding Oni lord. Here, the Oni becomes a symbol of cosmic justice, or perhaps cosmic retribution. It is the physical manifestation of a grudge so powerful that it refuses to fade. It suggests that strong emotions, hate, jealousy, despair, have a gravity of their own, capable of warping the fabric of reality and birthing a monster. As we stand at the end of the ancient era, looking forward into the medieval period, the Oni is poised for another transformation. It has gathered the fears of the forest, the dread of the invisible, the ghosts of the dead, and the anger of the exiled. It is a swirling, nebulous darkness, heavy with intent. But it is still lacking something. It lacks a uniform. It lacks the specific, codified anatomy of terror that we recognize today. The horns, the iron club, the tiger skin, these have not yet become the standard. The Oni is still a shadow in the mist, waiting for a light to be shined upon it, so that it can finally reveal its true, horrific face. That light would come from the west, from the burning lamps of Buddhist temples. A new map of the afterlife was being drawn, a map of fire and ice, of judgment and torture. And the cartographers of this hell needed workers. They needed jailers. And they looked to the Oni and said, "We have a job for you. So take a deep breath. Pull your cloak tighter around you. We are leaving the misty forests of ancient Japan. We are descending into the earth. The air is getting hotter. The smell of sulfur is rising. We are about to meet the jailers of Great King Enma. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of ancient Japan, do not forget to light your own lantern by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. The path ahead is dark, and we have many more myths to explore together. Stay close to the hearth. We have walked through the mist of ancient Japan, where the Oni were nothing more than a cold breath on the back of your neck. But now, the mist is lifting, replaced by a rising, acrid smoke. The smell is sulfur, burning flesh, and iron heated until it glows white. We are leaving the ambiguous world of the forest spirits and entering a place of absolute, bureaucratic precision. We are entering Jigoku, the Japanese hell. It is here, in this furnace of theological imagination, that the Oni found their bodies. They ceased to be merely the hidden ones and became the jailers of the damned. The architect of this terrifying transformation was not a warrior or a king, but a monk sitting in a quiet temple on Mount Hiei. His name was Genshin. In the year 985, a time when the capital was rife with plague and the end of the world felt perilously close, Genshin dipped his brush into ink and wrote a text that would scar the Japanese psyche for 1,000 years, the Oho Yoshu, or the Essentials of Rebirth in the Pure Land. While his intention was to guide souls to paradise, he knew that fear was a potent motivator, and so, in the first volume of this text, he painted a map of hell so vivid, so visceral, that it terrified an entire nation into piety. Let us follow the path of a soul as described in these ancient scrolls. When a person dies in traditional Japanese belief, they embark on a lonely journey. They walk through a gray, twilight wasteland until they reach the banks of a river. This is the Sanzu River, the river of 3 crossings, the boundary between the living and the dead. It is here that we meet the first true ancestors of the modern Oni, figures that are neither purely spirit nor purely human. Sitting at the edge of the water, beneath a gnarled tree that seems to weep with the weight of sorrow, waits an old woman. She is Datsueba, the old woman who strips clothes. She is a nightmare of sagging skin and wild white hair, her eyes gleaming with a malicious intelligence. She does not offer comfort. When a soul arrives, she demands their clothes. If they have none, she strips the skin from their bodies. She hands these garments to her companion, a towering old man named Kenyu. He hangs the clothes on the branches of the clothing-hanging tree. The branch bends according to the weight of the sins the clothes have absorbed. If the branch sags low, the soul is heavy with wickedness. This is the first judgment, a bureaucratic intake process presided over by these proto-oni. The horror of Datsueba is not just in her appearance, but in her function. In the ancient animistic world, spirits were chaotic, but Datsueba is a functionary. She has a job. This represents a fundamental shift in how the Japanese viewed the supernatural. The Oni were beginning to be absorbed into a system. They were becoming the enforcers of cosmic law. Once the soul passes this humiliation, they are brought before the great king Enma, Enma Dai-O. Enma is a terrifying figure, red-faced and thunderous, originally the Hindu god Yama, imported to Japan via China. He sits at a massive desk, flanked by severed heads that speak the truth of the deceased's life. But look at who stands guard around him. Look at the bailiffs of this dark court. They are the Oni. In the Jigoku Zoshi, the Hell Scrolls painted in the 12th century, we see them clearly for the first time. They are no longer the shapeless mononoke of the Heian court. They are hulking giants with skin the color of dried blood or bruised flesh. They wear loincloths of tiger skin. They hold iron clubs spiked with nails. These are the Gokusaotsu, the jailers of hell. They are not evil in the sense that they are rebelling against the gods. Rather, they are the necessary violence of the universe. They are the hands that scrub the soul clean, using pain as the soap. Among these jailers, two figures stand out, rising above the faceless horde of demons to become icons of terror: Gozu and Mezu. Gozu, the ox-headed demon, and Mezu, the horse-faced demon. These two are the first faces you see when the gates of hell slam shut behind you. Gozu towers over the damned, his head that of a massive bull, snorting steam, his human body rippling with impossible muscle. Mezu stands beside him, his long equine face twisted into a permanent sneer, his speed unmatched. Why an ox and a horse? In the agricultural society of ancient Japan, these were the beasts of burden. They were the animals that worked until they died, the animals that were driven by the whip. In hell, the roles are reversed. The beasts now hold the whip. Gosu and Mezu represent the brutal, unthinking force of karma. You cannot reason with an ox. You cannot bargain with a horse. They simply do their work, which is to break you. They are described in the texts as having strength capable of moving mountains, and they use this strength to crush sinners into a bloody pulp on iron anvils, only for a cool wind to blow and revive the sinners so the process can begin again. The Oho Yoshu categorizes the 8 great hells, Hachinetsu Jigoku, and in each one, the Oni play a specific, gruesome role. Let us look closer, if you have the stomach for it. In the Tokatsu Jigoku, the Hell of Reviving, The Oni are armed with iron claws. They do not merely kill, they tear. They rip the flesh from the bones of those who enjoyed killing animals in life. The text describes the sound, the wet tearing of muscle, the screams that echo in a void where no one listens. The Oni here are seemingly mindless, driven by a frenzy of violence, hacking the sinners to pieces. But the horror is in the reviving. The Oni step back, wait for the flesh to knit, and then attack again. It is an eternal loop of violence. Descend deeper to the Kokujo Jigoku, the hell of black cords. This hell is reserved for thieves and liars. Here, the Oni are not frenzied. They are craftsmen. They carry black measuring cords made of red-hot iron wire. They lay these cords across the naked bodies of the sinners, marking out perfect geometric lines. Then, with saws made of flaming steel, they cut along the lines. The precision is what terrifies. These Oni are not wild beasts. They are torturers with the focus of a carpenter. They represent the cold, calculating side of the Oni nature. The idea that your punishment will be measured exactly to fit your crime. Deeper still is the Kyokan Jigoku, the screaming hell. Here, the Oni throw sinners into vats of boiling oil or molten bronze. The imagery here is industrial. The Oni stir the vats with giant ladles, their faces illuminated by the glow of the molten metal. They are the workers in a factory of pain. The Oho Yoshu describes them as having eyes like lightning and voices like thunder, shouting at the sinners to confess their crimes. This Buddhist influence did something profound to the concept of the Oni. It gave them a physical anatomy. Before this, an Oni was a shadow, a possession, a sudden illness. Now, an Oni had to be strong enough to lift a cauldron. It had to have hands capable of holding a saw. It had to have legs that could stand firm on the burning iron floors of hell. The muscularity of the Oni was born here. The artists who painted the hell scrolls needed to depict strength, so they gave the Oni the bodies of sumo wrestlers, exaggerated and grotesque. They gave them claws to rend flesh and horns to symbolize their beastly nature. But there is a psychological layer here as well. In Buddhist theology, the Oni are often seen as manifestations of the sinner's own mind. The red Oni, Aka Oni, is the physical embodiment of ton, or greed, the burning desire that consumes the self. The blue Oni, Ao Oni, is Shin, or anger, the cold, hateful malice that freezes compassion. When a sinner looks at Gozu or Meizu, they are not looking at a separate entity. They are looking at a mirror. They are being beaten by their own vices, given monstrous form. By the end of the Heian Period, this image had solidified. The Oni had migrated from the vague, misty mountains of folklore into the high-definition nightmare of religious dogma. They were now the undisputed masters of violence, but a question remained. If these beings were the jailers of the dead, how did they come to walk the earth of the living? How did the servants of Enma escape the underworld to terrorize the villages of Japan? To answer this, we must look at how the native gods of Japan, the kami, reacted to this foreign invasion of demons. We must witness the collision of two spiritual worlds, a collision that would fracture the divine and create a new class of monster on the earthly plane. The history of mythology is rarely a straight line. It is a collision of tides. When Buddhism arrived in Japan, it did not wash away the ancient Shinto beliefs. It crashed into them, swirled around them, and eventually merged with them in a phenomenon known as Shinbutsu Shugo, the syncretism of kami and Buddhas. In this turbulent mixing of waters, many ancient gods were elevated to bodhisattvas, but others were cast down. The Oni is the result of this casting down. It is the wreckage of forgotten gods, twisting into demons. In the earliest strata of Japanese belief, there was no concept of good and evil as absolute moral poles. There was only order and chaos, purity and impurity. The kami, the native gods, were not benevolent guardians in the Christian sense. They were araburu kami, rough gods, or violent gods. A mountain god could provide water for the rice paddies one day, and trigger a landslide that buried the village the next. This violence was not seen as demonic. It was simply the nature of the divine, just as a tiger is not evil for eating a deer. However, as the imperial court in Kyoto sought to centralize power, they needed a way to categorize the spiritual world that mirrored their political control. The gods who submitted to the emperor and the Buddha were classified as protective. But what of the gods who refused? What of the spirits of the mountains who would not bow to the new laws? They were stripped of their divinity. The Araburu Kami were rebranded. They became Oni. We see this tragic devolution in the figure of Gotsu Tenno, the ox-headed heavenly king. Originally a deity imported from India and associated with the Gion shrine in Kyoto, Gotsu Tenno is a complex figure who straddles the line between god and demon. He was believed to be the bringer of epidemics. When the plague swept through the capital, it was the breath of Gotsu Tenno. Yet people prayed to him for protection from the plague. He was the poison and the cure. In art, he was often depicted with the fierce, ogre-like visage of a yaksha, a nature spirit of Hindu mythology that influenced the Oni. Over time, the terrifying aspects of such deities were peeled away and assigned to the Oni, leaving the safe aspects for the shrines. The Oni, in a sense, became the repository for the unwanted violence of the gods. This transformation was also fueled by the concept of the Marabito. The folklorist Orikuchi Shinobu identified the Marabito as a guest from the other world. In ancient village life, strangers who arrived from beyond the mountains were viewed with a mix of awe and terror. They brought new technologies, news, and goods, but they also brought disease and disruption. These visiting deities were welcomed with rituals to appease them, but if the rituals failed, or if the guest was hostile, the Marabito became an Oni. The most poignant example of this outsider becoming monster is found in the way the Japanese court viewed the indigenous peoples of the Emishi and the Tsuchigumo. We touched upon them earlier, but now we must see them through the lens of transformation. The Nihon Shoki and later legends of the warrior Sakanue no Tamuramaro depict the leaders of these tribes not as human generals, but as literal demons. Consider the legend of Otakamaru, a powerful Oni said to dwell in the Suzuka Mountains. In the folklore, he is a demon with black clouds swirling around him, capable of raining fire. But historians peel back the myth to find a likely reality. Otakamaru was likely a local chieftain of a mountain tribe who resisted the taxation and conscription of the Kyoto court. To the central government, he was an obstacle to civilization, To dehumanize him was to make it easier to kill him. The propaganda of the state painted him with the brush of the Oni. His foreign armor became iron skin. His foreign language became the growl of a beast. His resistance became demonic rebellion. This is the tragedy at the heart of the Oni. They are often the defeated. They are the gods of the losers. When a culture is conquered, its deities do not vanish. They are demonized. The horns of the Oni, often cited as symbols of the bull, Gozu, can also be seen as the stylized helmets of these indigenous warriors, or perhaps the antlers of deer gods worshipped by the hunting tribes of the Jomon period, now twisted into symbols of evil. The influence of Indian mythology, traveling along the Silk Road, accelerated this transformation. The Rakshasa, Rasetsu in Japanese, and Yaksha, Yasha, of Buddhist lore, were fierce, flesh-eating demons who guarded treasures or tormented sinners. The Japanese looked at their own rough gods and superimposed the image of the Rasetsu upon them. The Rasetsu were depicted as red or black, with wild hair and fangs. This imagery merged perfectly with the Japanese fear of the wild outsider. The Konjaku Monogatari-shu, a collection of tales from the late Heian period, is filled with stories where the line between a bad god and an Oni is non-existent. One specific element of the Oni's transformation is the Ushi no Toki Mairi, the visit at the hour of the ox. This ritual, which we will explore in depth later, involves a woman nailing a straw doll to a tree to place a curse. But notice the timing. The hour of the ox, roughly 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. And notice the direction. The Ushitora, ox-tiger direction, the northeast. In the Chinese zodiac, the northeast is the demon gate, Kimon. It is the direction from which bad luck and invaders come. The symbolism of the ox, Ushi, and the tiger, Tora, became the genetic code for the Oni's physical appearance. Why does the classic Oni have horns? Because of the ox. Why does it wear a tiger skin loincloth? Because of the tiger. The geography of the zodiac became the anatomy of the monster. The unlucky direction took on flesh and bone. By the height of the Heian period, the transformation was complete. The Oni were no longer just the jailers of hell or the invisible spirits of the mist. They were a distinct species of monster that walked the earth. They had leaders. They had castles. They had a culture of their own, a dark mirror of the imperial court. They were the Kimon come to life. And among them, one figure would rise to become the absolute zenith of this transformation. He was not just an Oni. He was a king. He did not hide in the dark. He built a palace on Mount Oa and drank wine from the skulls of aristocrats. He was the child of a dragon and a man, the ultimate hybrid of the violent god and the foreign demon. His name was Shuten-doji. But before we climb the blood-soaked slopes of Mount Oe to meet the drunken demon king, we must first look at the only force that stood between the terrified people of Kyoto and the encroaching darkness. We must turn our gaze to the stars, to the paper talismans, and to the man who made the demons tremble. We must speak of the Onmyoji. The sun sets over the capital of Heian Kyo, the city known today as Kyoto. It is the year 1000. In our modern world, night is merely a setting on a switch, a temporary inconvenience banished by LEDs and neon. But in the Heian period, The night was a physical weight. It was a shroud that descended upon the world, heavy and impenetrable. When the oil lamps flickered out, the city did not simply become dark. It ceased to belong to humanity. The streets, laid out in a perfect grid modeled after the Chinese capital, transformed into a labyrinth of terror. The Ma, the negative space between the light, expanded, and from that space the Oni emerged. To the aristocrats hiding behind their silk screens and wooden shutters, the Oni were not distant myths. They were an imminent weather condition. A sudden thunderstorm was the rage of a demon. A strange sickness was a curse carried on the wind. Against such overwhelming supernatural forces, a sword was useless. You cannot cut a shadow. You cannot parry a curse. To fight the invisible, the Japanese court turned to a new kind of warrior, one who wielded not a katana, but a brush, a chart of the stars, and the power of the spoken word. They turned to the Onmyoji. Onmyodo, the way of yin and yang, was the science of the Heian court. It was a complex blend of Taoist natural philosophy, Chinese astronomy, and esoteric rituals. The practitioners, the Onmyoji, were the bureaucrats of the supernatural. They were the bridge between the visible world of the emperor and the invisible world of the Oni. And standing at the pinnacle of this order, casting a shadow almost as long as the demons he fought, was the legendary Abe no Seimei. If the Oni is the ultimate monster of Japan, Abe no Seimei is the ultimate human counterweight. He is the Merlin of the East, a figure so wrapped in legend that the historical man has almost vanished. The myths whisper that he was not entirely human. The Kuzunoha legend tells us that his father saved a white fox from a hunter. The fox, in gratitude, transformed into a beautiful woman and married him. Seimei was the child of this union, half human, half kitsune. This lineage is crucial. To understand the Oni, one must be part monster oneself. Seimei possessed the second sight. He could see the invisible threads of karma and malice that the Oni wove through the capital. Imagine the atmosphere of a Heian night. The streets are empty, save for the wind rattling the wooden gates. A lone ox cart rumbles over the cobblestones. Inside sits a trembling nobleman. He is not afraid of bandits. He is afraid of the Hyaki Yagyo, the night parade of 100 demons. This is one of the most evocative images in all of Japanese folklore. It is said that on certain nights, when the moon is hidden and the boundaries of the worlds are weak, the Oni gather. They do not come alone. They lead a grotesque procession of yokai, strange, mutated spirits. There are umbrellas with one eye and a long tongue, worn-out straw sandals that have grown limbs, and broken lutes that sing mournful songs. But marching at the head of this chaotic parade, imposing order upon the madness, are the Oni. The Hyaki Yagyo is a terrifying spectacle of noise and chaos. The Konjaku Monogatari tells of a young monk who found himself trapped in an old temple at night. He hid, holding his breath, as the parade entered. He saw demons with the heads of horses, demons with the bodies of blue oxen, demons with 3 eyes and horns that scraped the ceiling. They drank, they danced, they shrieked. It was a festival of the grotesque. If a human were to look directly at the parade, it was said they would die instantly, their souls shattered by the sheer volume of supernatural energy. But Abe no Seimei could look. There is a famous anecdote where the young Saimei is accompanying his master on a night journey. While the other attendants are blind to the danger, Saimei sees the Oni approaching. He warns his master, who uses magic to hide the carriage. The Oni pass by, sniffing the air, sensing the warm blood of the living, but unable to find them. This is the essence of the Onmyoji's power, the ability to navigate the dark. The tools of the Onmyoji were designed specifically to counter the chaotic nature of the Oni. They used ofuda, strips of paper inscribed with powerful calligraphy, to create barriers. An Oni, for all its strength, cannot pass a barrier sealed with the correct name of a god. Names have power. To name an Oni is to control it. The Onmyoji also commanded shikigami, spirit servants conjured from paper dolls or the elements. These invisible familiars acted as spies and bodyguards, fighting fire with fire. One of the most chilling intersections of the Onmyoji and the Oni is found in the layout of the capital itself. Kyoto was designed with spiritual defense in mind. The northeast direction, the Ushitora, the ox tiger, was known as the Kimon, the demon gate. It was believed that the cold winds and the Oni came from this direction. To protect the city, great temples like Enryakuji were built on Mount Hiei to the northeast, serving as spiritual fortresses. The monks and Onmyoji stationed there were the sentinels, chanting sutras day and night to keep the demon gate closed. But the fear was not just of the invasion from without. It was the corruption from within. The Heian court was a place of intense jealousy and repression. Women, confined to their quarters, hidden behind layers of silk, often channeled their frustration and rage into the creation of living Oni, or Ikiryo. We see this in the tale of Genji, where the jealousy of Lady Rokujo becomes so potent that her spirit detaches from her body while she sleeps, traversing the city to haunt and kill her rival. She becomes an Oni, not through biology, but through emotion. The Onmyoji were called in to treat these cases. They would perform exorcisms, the Kaji Kito, chanting mantras to calm the raging spirit. The scene is atmospheric and tense. A darkened room, the smell of heavy incense, the rhythmic striking of wooden clappers, the woman thrashing on her futon as the Onmyoji battles the invisible demon clutching her chest. It was a psychological war as much as a spiritual one. The Oni was the manifestation of the unspoken, the repressed, the shadow self. As the Heian period drew to a close, the balance began to shift. The rituals of the Onmyoji, once sufficient to keep the darkness at bay, began to fail. The corruption of the court, the neglect of the provinces, and the rising violence of the samurai class fed the Oni. They grew stronger, they grew bolder. They stopped hiding in the shadows of the Hayaki Yagyo and began to build kingdoms of their own. The era of the sorcerer was ending. The era of the warrior was beginning. But before the sword could be drawn, the greatest Oni of them all had to be born. He would not be a mere foot soldier in the night parade. He would be a king. He would take the fear of the Oni and elevate it to an art form. He would build a palace of bone and sake on the slopes of Mount O. Travelers, prepare yourselves. We are leaving the refined streets of the capital. We are heading west to the dark, craggy peaks that loom over the Tanba province. We are going to meet the child of the dragon, the drinker of blood. We are going to meet Shuten-doji. Every monster has a mother. Every tyrant has a childhood. To understand Shuten-doji, the most infamous Oni in Japanese history, we must look past the monster he became and find the boy he once was. His story is not just a tale of evil, it is a tragedy of power, abandonment, and the corruption of the divine. He is the Lucifer of Japanese mythology, a being of immense potential who fell from grace to become the ruler of a hell on earth. The legends of Shuten-doji's birth are as varied as the mists that cling to Mount Ibuki, his ancestral home. Some say he was the son of a human woman and the great dragon of Mount Ibuki, Yamata no Orochi. This lineage connects him directly to the primordial chaos of the land. The dragon is a creature of water and storm, untamable and wild. From his father, Shuten-doji inherited a strength that defied human limits and a thirst that could never be quenched. Other tales paint a more psychological horror. They say he was a human child, born in the province of Echigo or Shiga. He was miraculously strong and unnaturally intelligent, often called a demon child by the villagers. But his defining trait was his beauty. He was so handsome that women fell instantly in love with him, and their jealousy over his affections caused chaos in the village. In this version, the boy was sent to a temple to become a monk, hoping the discipline of the Buddha would tame his wild spirit. It was at the temple that the transformation began. The Otogizoshi texts tell us that the young boy had a fondness for sake, rice wine, that went beyond mere indulgence. He drank to excess, his skin flushing a deep, vibrant red. This was the first mark of the Oni, the loss of control, the surrender to appetite. His name, Shuten-doji, literally translates to sake drinking boy, or the drunken boy. There is a chilling legend about a festival at the temple. The boy, known for his pranks, put on an Oni mask to scare the other monks. He danced through the corridors, roaring and laughing, reveling in the fear he created. But when the festival ended and he tried to take the mask off, it would not move. He pulled and clawed, but the wood had fused to his flesh. The painted grin had become his mouth. The golden eyes had become his own. The mask was no longer a disguise. It was his true face revealing itself. The high priest, seeing this, drove him from the temple, declaring him a monster. Cast out by human society, rejected by the holy order, the boy retreated into the mountains. This is a recurring theme in Oni mythology, the Kiju, or noble exile. The Oni is often a person who has been pushed to the margins until they have no choice but to become the monster society fears. Alone in the wilderness, his resentment grew. The humanity in him withered, and the dragon blood took over. He grew in size, towering over the pines. His skin turned the color of the sake he loved, a deep, flushed crimson. He began to gather others like him, criminals, outcasts, and lesser spirits who had no place in the world of men. He eventually settled on Mount Oi, a rugged peak northwest of Kyoto. The location was strategic. Mount O sat near the Sanin Road, a major artery for travelers and tribute bearers heading to the capital. It was the perfect ambush point. But Shuten-doji did not just hide in a cave. He built a kingdom. The description of Shuten-doji's Iron Palace on Mount Oa is a dark parody of the imperial palace in Kyoto. He established a court. He had generals, the 4 devas, Shitenno, mimicking the 4 Buddhist guardians. His chief lieutenant was Ibaraki-doji, a demon of immense power and beauty, who we will speak of later. They wore fine silks stolen from aristocrats. They drank from lacquerware cups. But the wine was blood, and the meat was human flesh. This mimicry is what makes Shuten-doji so terrifying. He was not a mindless beast like the jailers of hell. He was a civilized monster. He understood the hierarchy of the court and twisted it. He kidnapped young noblewomen from the capital, not just to eat them, but to serve as attendants in his twisted palace. They were forced to wash his clothes, pour his sake, and massage his massive, rock-hard shoulders, all while walking on floors slick with the blood of their kin. News of the Demon King spread to Kyoto. People began to vanish in unprecedented numbers. The tale of the Heike and other medieval chronicles describe a pall of gloom settling over the emperor's court. The kami of the mountain had been replaced by a warlord who recognized no authority but his own strength. Shuten-doji represented the ultimate anti-emperor. He ruled the night, while the emperor ruled the day. He ruled the chaos of the mountains, while the emperor ruled the order of the grid cities. The abductions became personal. It is said that the daughter of a high-ranking court advisor, or perhaps the daughter of the emperor himself, was taken. The cloud that hung over Mount O was said to be the smoke from the fires where he roasted his victims. The weeping of the women could be heard on the wind, carrying down to the valleys below. Shuten-doji's power was absolute in his domain. He could change his size at will. He could command the wind and thunder. He was invincible in combat. Blades shattered against his skin, and arrows turned to ash before they reached him. He was the culmination of the Oni myth, the physical strength of the ox, the predatory instinct of the tiger, the magical lineage of the dragon, and the intelligence of a human. But he had one weakness. It was in his name. It was in his history. The sake-drinking boy loved the poison that had made him. His arrogance was his armor, but his thirst was the chink in that armor. He believed himself untouchable, a god of the new, dark world he had created. He sat on his throne of bearskins, drinking deep from a giant saucer, laughing at the puny humans in the capital. He did not know that in the capital, the emperor had finally had enough. He did not know that the prayers had been offered, the incense burned, and the warriors summoned. He did not know that the age of heroes was about to climb his mountain. Minamoto, no Raiko, the greatest demon slayer of the age, was sharpening his sword. He was gathering his own 4 guardian kings, and he was not coming with an army. He was coming with a trick. He was coming as a guest. The stage is set for the greatest confrontation in Japanese folklore. The Red Demon King versus the samurai. The raw chaos of the wild versus the disciplined steel of civilization. But before the blood flows, we must understand the journey. The climb up Mount O is treacherous, and the hospitality of a demon is a dangerous thing to accept. The wind howls through the crags of Mount O. It carries the scent of iron and charcoal, a smell that speaks of old blood and dying fires. We stand now at the precipice of the legend. The Demon King, Shuten-doji, sits upon his throne of stolen silks, confident in his invincibility. But from the capital of Kyoto, a storm of a different kind is approaching. It is not a storm of wind and rain, but a storm of steel and resolve. It is here, in the damp, moss-choked forests of the Tanba province that the ultimate game of deception will be played. The Emperor Ichijo, weary of the weeping mothers and the vanished daughters, issued a divine command. The darkness on the mountain must be extinguished. But he knew that sending an army was futile. Soldiers marched up Mount Oe and never returned, or they returned in pieces, tied to the branches of pine trees as grisly warnings. To kill a monster that defied the laws of nature, one needed a warrior who transcended the laws of men. He summoned Minamoto no Raiko. Raiko, also known as Yorimitsu, was the exemplar of the Heian warrior. He was not just a swordsman. He was a demon queller. At his side stood the Shitenno, the four guardian kings, Watanabe no Tsuna, the wielder of the beard cutter, Sakata no Kintoki, the golden boy of immense strength, Urabe no Suetake, and Usui no Sadamitsu. Together with their friend Fujiwara no Hosho, they formed a brotherhood of heroes that would be sung about for 1,000 years. But Raiko knew that strength alone would not fell the Red King. Shuten-doji's skin was harder than iron. His magic was potent. To defeat him, they had to strip him of his defenses. They had to enter the lion's den, not as hunters, but as prey. And so they set aside their lacquer armor. They hid their famous swords, the dojigiri, monster cutter, and the higekiri, in portable chests meant for carrying religious texts. They donned the rough hemp robes of yamabushi, the mountain ascetics. These were wandering monks who sought enlightenment in the wilderness, figures who were respected and feared, but mostly considered harmless to a demon who thought himself a god. With staffs in hand and conch shells at their waists, they began the climb. The ascent of Mount Oe is a journey into a nightmare landscape. The Otogizoshi chronicles describe the path as treacherous, winding through ravines where the sun never touches the ground. As the heroes climbed, the air grew heavy with a metallic tang. They came upon a mountain stream, and here the horror of their mission was made physical. The water was not clear. It was stained a deep, churning crimson. Down the current floated combs, hairpins, and shreds of kimono silk. Further upstream, they found an old woman weeping on a rock. She was washing a blood-soaked garment in the river. She looked up at Raiko, her eyes hollow with centuries of grief. She told them she was a captive, forced to wash the clothes of the murdered women before they were eaten. She warned them, "The king drinks the blood of the living like wine. Turn back." But Raiko bowed low, thanked her, and pressed on. Her warning was the confirmation he needed. He was on the right path. Before they reached the Iron Palace, the legends say they were visited by 3 old men in a cave. These were no ordinary hermits. They were the avatars of the gods, Hachiman, Kasuga, and Sumiyoshi, come to aid their champions. They gave Raiko a helmet to protect his head and, most importantly, a bottle of sake. This was no ordinary wine. It was the Shimben Kidoku, the divine elixir of poisonous magic. To a human, it was a medicine that increased strength. To an Oni, it was a paralytic poison that would rob them of their magic. Armed with divine favor, the 6 monks arrived at the gates of the Iron Palace. It was a grotesque fortress, described as having pillars of black iron and tiles made of copper that gleamed like fresh blood. The demons guarding the gate, hulking brutes with blue skin and tusks, sneered at the puny humans, but Raiko, playing his part perfectly, bowed and asked for lodging. Shuten-doji, intrigued by the boldness of these travelers, ordered them brought before him. The throne room was a cavernous hall lit by torches that burned with a sickly green fire. The walls were lined with the skulls of samurai, and there, lounging on a dais covered in tiger skins, was the king. Shuten-doji, in his human-like form, was terrifyingly beautiful. He was a giant, over 10 feet tall, with wild red hair and eyes that burned like coals. He wore the robes of a courtier, but they hung loosely over a body of rippling muscle. He looked at Raiko with suspicion. "Why do you come here, to the land of the dead?" he asked, his voice like grinding stones. Raiko answered with a lie so smooth it would have impressed a courtier. "We are poor monks, lost in the mountains. We heard of a great king who rules these peaks and sought his benevolence." Shuten-doji laughed. It was a sound that shook the dust from the rafters. His vanity was his weakness. He invited them to join his banquet. What followed was a test of stomach and steel. The demons served the monks plates of meat. It was unmistakably human flesh. They served bowls of soup. It was blood. The demons watched, grinning, waiting for the monks to vomit or scream. But Raiko and his men did not flinch. They ate the flesh. They drank the blood. They praised the meal as a rare delicacy. In the code of the samurai, duty overrides all revulsion. To kill the monster, they had to partake in his sin. This act of grim resolve lulled Shuten-doji's suspicions. These are no ordinary monks, he thought, but they are clearly men of the wild, like me. Raiko then offered his gift. "We have brought a rare wine from the capital," he said, producing the Shimben Kidoku. "It is called the wine of smile-giving." Shuten-doji, the sake-drinking boy, could not resist. He smelled the jar. It smelled of rice and heaven. He drank deep. He offered it to his lieutenants, including the wary Ibaraki-doji. They all drank. The banquet turned into a revelry. The demons danced. Raiko and his men danced with them, clapping their hands, singing songs of friendship, all while checking the positions of their hidden swords. Slowly, the poison began to work. The demons' limbs grew heavy. Their speech slurred. Shuten-doji, his face flushed a deep purple, stumbled to his private chambers, dragging a few captive women with him. He collapsed onto his bed, falling into a stupor. The moment had arrived. The monks shed their robes. Beneath they wore their armor. They drew their swords, the steel singing in the silence of the palace. They stormed the bedchamber. There, Shuten-doji lay, his true form revealed. He was a mountain of red flesh, 5 horned limbs, and a face of absolute malice. The 3 gods appeared again, holding the demon's limbs down so he could not struggle. Raiko stood at the head of the bed. He raised the dojigiri, the sword forged by the legendary smith Yasutsuna. He prayed to Hachiman, and he struck. The blade sliced through the demon's neck like a hot knife through wax. But the legend does not end with the cut. As the massive head severed from the body, it did not die. The eyes snapped open. The mouth roared. The head flew into the air, propelled by pure rage. It dove at Raiko, aiming to bite his head off. "You lied! You foul, lying monks!" the head screamed. "Demons do not lie. Only humans do." This is the most haunting line in the myth. In his final moment, the monster claims the moral high ground. He was a killer, yes, but he was honest about his nature. Raiko had used deception. It is a moment of profound ambiguity that elevates the story from a simple adventure to a tragedy. The flying head clamped its jaws onto Raiko's helmet. The fangs ground against the steel. If not for the divine helmet given by the gods, Raiko would have been decapitated. But the steel held. The head lost its strength and fell to the floor, a dead weight at last. The rest was a slaughter. The Shuten cut down the drunken demons. They freed the weeping captives. They burned the iron palace to the ground. The black smoke rose into the dawn sky, signaling to the capital that the nightmare was over. Or so they thought. Raiko returned to Kyoto a hero. The head of Shuten-doji was buried at the Uji treasure house, for it was too dangerous to bring into the sacred capital. But as the celebrations raged, one shadow slipped away from the burning mountain. One demon had not drunk enough of the poison. One demon had seen the king fall and had chosen survival over honor. Ibaraki Doji was alive, and he was heading for the Rashomon Gate. The fires of Mount Oe had been extinguished, but embers have a way of traveling on the wind. While Shuten-doji was the king, representing the raw power and charisma of the Oni, his right hand, Ibaraki Doji, represented something else: persistence. Ibaraki was the survivor. In some legends, Ibaraki is female, Shuten-doji's lover. In others, a male lieutenant. But in all versions, Ibaraki is the shadow that escapes the light. Months passed since the great victory. The capital of Heian had returned to its uneasy rhythm. But a new terror began to whisper through the streets. It centered on the Rashomon Gate. The Rashomon was the grand southern gate of the city, a massive two-story structure meant to impress visitors. But by the late Heian Period, it had fallen into disrepair. The paint was peeling, the statues were broken, and the upper story had become a dumping ground for unclaimed corpses and unwanted babies. It was a festering wound in the city's architecture, a place where the Ma collected like stagnant water. People began to disappear near the gate. Samurai, who crossed the Ichijo Modoribashi Bridge at night, reported a strange presence. The hero, Watanabe no Tsuna, one of Raiko's 4 guardian kings, took it upon himself to investigate. Tsuna was a man of iron nerve, the perfect stoic warrior. One night, a night of driving rain and howling wind, Tsuna rode his horse toward the Rashomon. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the flashes of lightning that illuminated the gargoyles on the gate's roof. As he attempted to cross the bridge, he saw a young woman. She was beautiful, standing alone in the storm, her kimono soaked, her long black hair plastered to her skin. She looked at Tsuna with pleading eyes and asked for a ride as far as Gojo. It was a classic trap, the damsel in distress motif that Oni loved to exploit. Tsuna, bound by the code of chivalry but honed by the fires of Mount O, sensed the wrongness in the air, the smell of ozone and musk. But he nodded and pulled her up onto his horse. As they rode, the woman remained silent. But as they passed a dark corner, or perhaps as they caught their reflection in the water of the moat, the illusion shattered. The soft arm wrapped around Tsuna's waist hardened. the nails elongated into jagged claws, the beautiful face contorted, the skin splitting to reveal the blue visage of an Oni. "I am taking you to Mount Atago," the demon shrieked, gripping Suna's topknot and lifting him bodily off his horse. The strength was impossible. Suna was dangling in midair, ascending toward the stormy sky. But Watanabe, no Tsuna, did not panic. He drew his sword, the sun nashi, in a blur of motion. He did not strike at the demon's body. He struck at the arm that held him. With a kiai that drowned out the thunder, he slashed upward. The blade bit through bone and sinew. The severed arm of the Oni fell to the earth, still clutching Suna's hair. The demon, Ibaraki-doji, screamed, a sound of pain and shock that shattered roof tiles nearby. "I will be back for that," the demon howled, clutching its bleeding stump, before vanishing into the black clouds toward the mountains. Suna landed on the muddy ground, shaken but alive. He pried the demon's hand from his hair. It was a grotesque trophy, massive, hairy, with claws like daggers and skin as rough as pine bark. He wrapped it in his cloak and returned to Raiko's mansion. The severed arm of Ibaraki-doji became an object of immense spiritual danger. The Onmyoji, likely Abe no Seimei himself, were consulted. They warned Tsuna, "The demon will come for its limb. You must lock yourself in your house for 7 days. Perform the rituals of purification. Let no one in, not a servant, not a friend, not a family member. The Oni is a master of disguise." For 6 days, Tsuna sat in the dark, chanting sutras. The arm was locked in a sturdy wooden box, sealed with holy talismans. Every night, the house groaned. Strange winds battered the shutters. Scratches appeared on the doors. Ibaraki was testing the defenses. On the evening of the 7th day, the final night of the vigil, there was a knock at the gate. It was an old woman. She claimed to be Tsuna's aunt, his wet nurse from the province of Setsu. She had traveled far to see her famous nephew. Tsuna refused her entry. "I am under a vow," he called out. "I cannot see anyone." But the old woman wept. She played upon the strings of filial piety, the deepest obligation of a Japanese son. "I washed you when you were a babe," she cried. "I held you when you were sick. And now that you are a great hero, you turn your old aunt away into the cold night?" Tsuna's resolve cracked. He was a warrior, but he was also a man of honor. He could not shame his family. He unbarred the gate. He let the old woman in. She was frail, leaning on a cane, her face wrinkled and kind. She praised him for his bravery. They sat and drank tea. Then she asked with a grandmother's curiosity, "Is it true? Did you really cut off the arm of a demon? I would love to see such a thing before I die." Tsuna hesitated. But the sun had almost set. The 7 days were nearly over. The woman was his kin. What harm could it do? He brought out the box. He broke the seals. He lifted the lid. The old woman peered into the box. "Oh," she whispered, "how frightening." She leaned closer. "How familiar." In a split second, the frailty vanished. The old woman's eyes flashed yellow. She snatched the arm from the box with a speed that blurred the air. "I'll take this back," she roared, her voice dropping into the guttural growl of Ibaraki-doji. She transformed right there in the tea room, growing to the ceiling, the old woman's skin shredding to reveal the demon beneath. She kicked a hole through the roof and shot up into the night sky, clutching her reclaimed arm. Suna grabbed his sword and struck, but he was a second too late. He only severed a piece of her robe. Ibaraki-doji escaped. The demon had used Suna's own humanity, his love for his family, against him. It was a bitter lesson. You can defeat an Oni with steel, but you can only keep it away with a heart of stone. The legend of Ibaraki-doji ends in ambiguity. Some say the demon never returned, content with reclaiming its body. Others say Ibaraki wandered the land in disguise, a lonely, maimed immortal. But the severed arm motif became etched into the Japanese consciousness. It is a reminder that the victory over the shadow is never complete. There is always a piece that escapes. There is always a knock at the door on the seventh night. The age of the great demon lords passed with Shuten-doji, but the Oni did not disappear. They changed. They moved from the battlefields to the bridges, from the palaces to the bedrooms. They became stories of tragedy and obsession. We leave the blood-soaked history of the samurai now. We turn our gaze to a different kind of horror, a horror born not of politics or war, but of love turned sour. We turn to the story of the Hashihime, the princess of the bridge, and the iron crown of jealousy. The heavy iron doors of history close on the era of the warrior kings. The shouts of Raiko and the roar of Shuten-doji fade into the echo of the mountains. But silence in Japanese folklore is rarely empty. It is often the prelude to a different kind of scream, one that does not come from the battlefield, but from the broken heart. We turn now to a terrifying truth whispered in the No theaters and the shrines of Kyoto. One does not need to be born a demon to become one. Sometimes, all it takes is love, curdled into hate. In the taxonomy of the Oni, there is a distinct and tragic category known as the Kijo, or Hannya. These are female demons. Unlike the brute, muscular Oni of hell, who torture sinners because it is their job, the Kijo tortures because she is in pain. Her transformation is driven by an emotion so intense, so corrosive, that it dissolves her humanity and reshapes her flesh into a vessel of vengeance. And the most famous of these tragic monsters is the Hashihime, the princess of the bridge. The legend takes us to the Uji River, a rushing torrent of water that flows south of Kyoto. The Uji Bridge, spanning this river, is one of the oldest and most significant in Japanese history. Bridges in folklore are liminal spaces. They are neither here nor there, connecting one bank to another, the known to the unknown. It is the perfect hunting ground for a spirit trapped between worlds. The story, immortalized in the Heike Monogatari and the No play Kanawa, the Iron Crown, begins with a woman. She is not a sorceress or a warrior. She is a wife. But her husband has committed the gravest sin in the Heian courtly world. He has forgotten her. He has taken a new lover, a younger woman, and cast his first wife aside like a worn-out fan. Consumed by a jealousy that burned hotter than any fire, the woman made a pilgrimage to the Kifune Shrine. This shrine, nestled in the deep, cedar-choked valleys north of Kyoto, is a place of ancient power, dedicated to the dragon god of water. For 7 nights, she walked the lonely mountain path. For 7 nights, she prayed with a singular, terrifying focus. She did not pray for her husband's return. She prayed for the power to kill him. "Oh, great god of Kifune," she whispered into the dark, "make me a living demon. Let me become an Oni while I still breathe, so that I may tear the throat out of the woman who stole my life." On the 7th night, the oracle spoke. A voice, cold as the mountain stream, gave her a recipe for monstrosity. "If you truly wish to become an Oni," the god said, "wear a red kimono. Smear your face with vermilion powder. Place an iron trivet upon your head, and set 3 candles burning upon its legs. Hold a torch in your mouth. Then go to the Uji River, and immerse yourself in the water for 21 days. The imagery here is precise and horrific. The iron trivet, a 3-legged stand used for cooking pots, becomes the iron crown, Kanawa. The 3 burning candles represent the horns of the Oni, fire and iron combined. The red kimono symbolizes the blood she intends to spill. The vermilion face paint marks her transition from human to spirit. The woman did not hesitate. She returned to her home and prepared the ritual. Imagine the sight of her walking through the streets of Kyoto in the dead of night. The rain is falling. She is wearing the iron ring on her head, the candles flickering in the wind, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. She holds a torch between her teeth, her jaw aching, her eyes wide and unblinking. She looks like a monster before the transformation has even begun. She reached the Uji River and waded into the freezing current. She stood there, day after day, night after night. The water numbed her skin, but the fire of jealousy kept her blood boiling. She focused her entire being on the image of her husband and his new lover. She fed her rage until it was the only thing left. On the 21st night, the humanity finally broke. Her skin turned green. Her fingers elongated into talons. The iron trivet fused to her skull, the candles becoming living horns of flame. She had become the Hashihime. She was no longer a woman. She was a Namanari, a living demon. That night, she unleashed her horror. She did not just attack her husband. She attacked the world. The legend says she possessed the power to kill a man simply by looking at him. If a pregnant woman crossed the bridge, the Hashihime would rip the unborn child from her womb. She became the embodiment of envy, hating everything that represented the future or happiness. In the no play version, Kanawa, the husband, plagued by nightmares, consults the great Onmyoji Abe no Seimei. Seimei, seeing the killing shadow upon the man, realizes that his cast-off wife has become a demon. He prepares a counter-ritual. He makes 2 life-size straw dolls, inscribing the names of the husband and the new wife upon them. He prays to the 5 great kings to transfer the curse to the dolls. The climax of the play is a masterpiece of tension. The Hashihime arrives, invisible to the naked eye, but visible to the audience. She approaches the sleeping couple, raising her iron staff to strike. She pours out her grievances, her voice a mix of sobbing and roaring. "I washed your robes in spring. I warmed your wine in autumn, and this is my reward." But as she strikes, the magic of Seimei activates. The straw dolls absorb the blow. The gods of the shrine rebuke her. Overpowered by the divine barrier, she retreats, weeping tears of blood, vowing to return. "I will wait," she hisses. "I will wait until the protection fades." The Hashihime legend gave birth to one of the most ominous rituals in Japanese folklore, Ushi no Toki Mairi, the visit at the hour of the ox. This is the real-world enactment of the Hashihaime's curse. Even into the modern era, one could find trees near shrines in Japan scarred by iron nails. The ritual requires a person to sneak into a shrine between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., the hour of the ox. They wear a white robe, mirrors on their chest, and high wooden clogs. They place candles on their head, mimicking the Hashihime's iron crown. They nail a straw effigy of their enemy to the sacred tree. Goshinboku. This ritual is the ultimate expression of the Oni within. It suggests that anyone, pushed far enough by betrayal, can become a demon. The hour of the ox is the time when the boundary to the spirit world is open, and by performing this act, the human invites the Oni spirit to enter them. It is a solitary, desperate act of hate. The Hashihime is terrifying because she is sympathetic. She is not a warlord like Shuten-doji. She is a victim. Her horns grew from her heartbreak. She reminds us that the line between love and hate is razor thin, and that the most dangerous demons are the ones we create ourselves, in the silence of our own bedrooms, when we are left alone with our grief. But not all female Oni are born of heartbreak. Some are born of a much older, colder hunger. We must leave the rushing waters of the Uji River now. We must travel north to the desolate moors of the Mutsu province. There is a small hut there, with a light in the window. A kindly old woman sits inside, spinning thread. But do not be deceived. The thread she spins is a web, and the spider is hungry. The wind blows differently in the north. In the ancient province of Mutsu, modern-day Fukushima, the landscape is vast, empty, and unforgiving. It is a place of Suzuki grass, tall, silver pampas grass that sways like an ocean of ghosts under the pale moon. Here, far from the capital and the courts, the Oni takes on a primal form. It is not a princess or a general. It is the Oni Baba, the demon hag. The legend of Adachigahara, also known as Kurozuka, the Black Mound, is a cautionary tale about the dangers of the wild and the deception of appearances. It is a story that has been told around hearths for centuries, warning travelers never to trust the solitary light in the distance. The story typically centers on a Buddhist monk, often named Yokai, who is on a pilgrimage. He is traveling across the Adachi Moor as the sun begins to set. The temperature drops rapidly. The wind howls, sounding like the crying of lost children. Yokai realizes he cannot make it to the next village before nightfall. He is exposed, vulnerable to wolves and bandits. Then he sees it. A small thatched hut standing alone in the sea of grass. A warm orange glow spills from the window. Relief floods his heart. He approaches the door and knocks. An old woman answers. She is frail, her back bent like a wind-twisted pine. Her hair is white and thin. She invites him in with a toothless smile. "I have little to offer," she says, "but you may share my fire and my roof." Yokai enters. The hut is sparse but clean. A spinning wheel sits in the corner. The old woman offers him meager food, perhaps some millet or roasted nuts. They talk. She seems lonely, a hermit living out her final days in solitude. She tells him she must go out to gather firewood to keep them warm through the freezing night. "But promise me one thing," she says, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Do not look into the back room. It is my private sleeping quarter, and it is messy. I would be ashamed for a holy man to see it. Yokai agrees. It is a simple request, a matter of courtesy. The old woman leaves, disappearing into the dark moor. Hours pass. The fire begins to die. The cold creeps in. Yokai sits alone, chanting his sutras. But curiosity is a persistent itch. Why was she so adamant? What could a poor old woman have to hide? Maybe she has food she is hoarding. Maybe a family shrine? The silence of the hut becomes oppressive. The the negative space, begins to weigh on him. Slowly, almost against his will, Yokai stands up. He creeps toward the sliding door of the back room. He hesitates. The warning echoes in his mind. Do not look. He slides the door open just a crack. A stench hits him. A thick, cloying smell of copper and rot. He lifts his lantern. The light reveals a scene from the deepest hell. The room is not a bedroom. It is a slaughterhouse. Piles of human bones are stacked to the ceiling. Skulls grin from the corners. Freshly severed limbs hang from the rafters like drying meat. The floor is sticky with blood. This was not a hermit's home. It was a lair. The kindly old woman was an Oni Baba, a demon hag who lured travelers in to devour them. Terror, cold and absolute, seizes the monk. He realizes the firewood she went to gather was likely an excuse to sharpen her knife or call her kin. He grabs his staff and flees into the night, running blindly through the tall grass. He has not gone far when he hears it. A sound that freezes his blood. Thump, thump, thump. Rapid footsteps behind him. And then, a shriek. You looked! You looked! You broke your promise! He risks a glance back. The old woman is pursuing him. But she is old no more. She is running with supernatural speed, leaping over bushes. Her white hair flies wild in the wind like a storm cloud. Her mouth is split ear to ear, revealing rows of jagged iron teeth. She holds a bone cleaver in one hand, gleaming in the moonlight. She is the Oni Baba in her true form, a creature of pure appetite. The chase across the Adachi Moor is one of the most suspenseful sequences in Japanese myth. It is the nightmare of being hunted. Yokai runs until his lungs burn, chanting the name of Kannon, the bodhisattva of mercy. The hag gains on him, her breath hot on his neck. She is the manifestation of the devouring mother, the perversion of the nurturing female figure into a cannibalistic predator. In the climax of the legend, and the No play, Kurozuka, Yokai is cornered. He falls to his knees, knowing he cannot outrun a demon. He clutches his Buddhist rosary and prays with the desperation of the dying. Om Mani Padme Hum. Just as the Oni Baba raises her cleaver to split his skull, the power of the Buddha intervenes. In some versions, a divine light descends and paralyzes her. In others, the monk's prayers turn the very grass into binding ropes. The Oni Baba recoils, screaming in pain, not from a weapon, but from the holy aura. She shrivels, her power broken by faith. She flees back into the darkness, or dissolves into dust, leaving behind only the lonely mound of Kurozuka. The Oni Baba of Adachigahara represents a primal fear, the fear of the wild places where civilization's rules do not apply. But she also represents the horror of isolation. Why did she eat men? Was it just hunger? Or was it a twisted desire to absorb life in a place of death? There is a tragic backstory often attached to her. Some legends say she was once a nursemaid to a noble house. Her charge, a young princess, was dying of a mute sickness. A fortune-teller said the only cure was the fresh liver of an unborn baby. The nursemaid, out of fierce loyalty, went into the wilderness to find a pregnant woman. Years passed. She grew mad with the waiting. When she finally killed a pregnant traveler and ripped out the liver, she discovered the victim was her own daughter, who had left home to find her lost mother. The shock broke her mind completely, turning her into the Oni Baba, who kills all who approach. This layer of tragedy is essential to the Japanese Oni mythos. The monster is rarely just a monster. It is a being created by suffering. The Oni Baba is the horrific result of loyalty taken to the extreme, of a mind shattered by the cruelty of fate. As we leave the Adachi Moor, the sun rises, chasing away the shadows of the hag. But the image of the Oni is now complete. We have seen the king on the mountain, the jealous wife on the bridge, and the cannibal in the hut. We have seen the horns, the fangs, and the iron clubs. But what do these symbols mean? Why are they red or blue? Why the tiger skin? To understand the Oni fully, we must dissect the monster. We must lay it out on the table and examine the anatomy of a nightmare. We have journeyed through the mist of history, climbed the blood-soaked peaks of Mount O, and witnessed the tragic transformation of the human heart into a demon. We have seen the Oni as a ghost, as a warlord, and as a sorrowful woman. But if you were to ask a child in Japan today to draw an Oni, they would not draw a shadow or a princess. They would draw a very specific image. A giant with brightly colored skin, wild hair, horns protruding from its skull, wearing a loincloth made of tiger skin, and holding a massive iron club. This image is iconic. It is as recognizable as the samurai's katana or the geisha's fan. But in mythology, nothing is accidental. Every detail of the Oni's appearance is a code, a layer of symbolism that has been calcified over centuries. To truly understand the monster, we must dissect it. We must look at the anatomy of the nightmare and ask, why are they red and blue? Why do they wear the skin of a tiger? And what is the terrifying weight of the iron club? Let us begin with the skin. The most striking feature of the Oni is its unnatural coloration. They are not merely pale or dark. They are vivid, primary forces of nature. The two most common varieties are the Aka Oni, red Oni, and the Ao Oni, blue Oni. While folklore often presents them as a duo, a sort of darkly comic pair where the red is the brute and the blue is the schemer, their origins lie deep in Buddhist theology. The colors of the Oni are not decorative, they are diagnostic. They correspond to the 5 hindrances, Yokai, the 5 heavy poisons that cloud the human mind and prevent enlightenment. When you look at a red Oni, you are not just seeing a monster. You are seeing the physical manifestation of ton, or intense greed and desire. Red is the color of blood, of fire, of a face flushed with lust or gluttony. The red Oni is the spirit that wants too much, the hunger that consumes the self. It represents the active, burning passions that destroy peace. The blue Oni, sometimes depicted as green, represents Shin, or hatred and anger. This is not the hot, explosive anger of the red. This is the cold, seething malice of the deep ocean. It is the color of a bruised corpse, of a face drained of warmth. The blue Oni is the embodiment of resentment, the grudge that sits in the pit of the stomach and freezes compassion. But the spectrum of hell is wider than just red and blue. The yellow Oni, Ki Oni, represents Jokyo, or restlessness and regret, the inability to find peace, the agitated mind that scatters focus. The green Oni, Midori Oni, often interchangeable with blue, can specifically symbolize konjin, or drowsiness and torpor, the spiritual laziness that leads to negligence. And finally, the black Oni, Kuro Oni, represents jiji, or doubt, the suspicion that corrodes trust and faith. So, when the monks of the Heian period painted the Hell Scrolls, they were not just creating scary monsters. They were color-coding the human condition. An army of multicolor Oni is essentially an army of our own worst flaws, magnified and given iron clubs. Now, look at the waist of the monster. Why the tiger skin? Why, of all the animals in the Asian bestiary, does the Oni choose the stripes of the tiger for its loincloth? Fundoshi? The answer lies not in fashion, but in the stars. We must return to the concept of the Kimon, the demon gate. As we touched upon earlier, ancient Chinese and Japanese geomancy, feng shui, divides the compass into 12 zodiac animals. The northeast direction is the direction of danger, the gate through which evil spirits enter the world. In the zodiac wheel, the northeast sits precisely between the ox, Ushi, and the tiger, Tora. This is the Ushitora direction. And here is the cosmic joke that became flesh. The Oni is the literal embodiment of this direction. It takes the horns of the ox, Ushi, and the claws and skin of the tiger, Tora. The classic Oni is a chimera born of a compass point. It is a geomantic pun walking on two legs. By wearing the tiger skin and bearing the ox horns, the Oni is declaring its origin. I come from the northeast. I come from the place where your luck runs out. This explains why the Oni is physically so powerful. It combines the unstoppable, crushing force of the ox with the predatory ferocity of the tiger. It is a creature of impossible biological contradiction, held together by malice. And what does this creature hold in its hand? The kanabo. The kanabo, or kanabo, is a weapon of pure terror. It is a club, usually made of solid iron or heavy wood sheathed in metal, covered in spikes or studs. It is not a weapon of finesse. It does not cut. It shatters. In the hands of a samurai, the sword is a symbol of the soul, of precision and discipline. In the hands of an Oni, the kanabo is a symbol of brute, indiscriminate destruction. It does not matter if you are wearing armor. The kanabo will crush the bones beneath the steel. There is a famous Japanese idiom, Oni ni kanabo, giving an iron club to an Oni. It means to make something that is already strong even stronger, to make the invincible absolute. It captures the hopelessness of facing such a creature. An Oni is already strong enough to tear a man in half. Giving it a kanabo is simply unfair. It represents the overwhelming nature of disaster. You cannot parry an earthquake. You cannot block a tsunami. And you cannot deflect a kanabo. The hair of the Oni is also significant. It is typically depicted as wild, tangled, and often wiry or metallic. In a culture like Japan, where grooming and hair arrangement were strict indicators of social status and civilization, the samurai's topknot, the courtier's cap, the messy, unkempt hair of the Oni marks it as an outsider. It is the antithesis of culture. It is the wild growth of the deep mountains that refuses to be tamed by the comb. Even the number of eyes and fingers can vary, though the classic image settles on 2 eyes, 2 horns, and 5 fingers. However, older depictions and regional variants often show Oni with 3 eyes, a sign of supernatural perception, or 3 fingers, symbolizing the 3 poisons of Buddhism: greed, anger, ignorance. This anatomy serves a purpose. It is designed to induce a primal fight or flight response. The horns pierce the silhouette, breaking the human shape. The red skin signals danger, like a poisonous animal. The tiger skin triggers the ancestral fear of the predator. The kanabo threatens bodily annihilation, but there is a strange duality in this grotesque form. In later centuries, as the fear of the Oni began to wane, these same features became almost comical. The tiger skin pants became a caricature. The scary red Oni became a bumbling brute who could be tricked by clever humans. The anatomy of a nightmare slowly morphed into the anatomy of a mascot. Yet, make no mistake, in the deep snows of the Japanese winter, when the wind howls from the northeast, the old fear returns. The anatomy of the Oni is not just a collection of random traits. It is a perfectly engineered machine of terror, built from the cultural anxieties of a nation. It is the ox that tramples, the tiger that hunts, the iron that crushes, and the red rage that burns. And how does a human fight such a thing? You cannot use a sword, for the skin is too thick. You cannot use a bow, for the arrows turn to ash. To fight the Oni, you must use magic. You must use the power of the seasons. You must use a bean. The turning of the seasons in Japan is not merely a change in weather. It is a shift in the spiritual fabric of the world. The most dangerous time of all is the seam between winter and spring. Winter is the season of death, of cold, of the yin energy. Spring is the season of life, of warmth, of yang. When these 2 massive tectonic plates of energy grind against each other, cracks appear in the barrier between worlds, and through these cracks, the Oni try to enter. This transitional period is known as Setsubun, literally seasonal division. While there are technically 4 Setsubuns in a year, the one that marks the beginning of spring, the Lunar New Year, is the most significant. It is the night when the darkness of winter makes its last desperate stand. To protect their homes and their lives, the Japanese people developed a ritual arsenal designed specifically to repel the Oni. The roots of Setsubun lie in a much older, more elaborate court ritual known as the Tsuina, or the Great Exorcism. Introduced from China in the Nara period, around the 8th century, the Tsuina was a spectacle of high magic performed in the imperial palace on New Year's Eve. Imagine the scene in the flickering torchlight of the ancient palace courtyard. The central figure of the ritual was not a priest, but a terrifying shaman known as the Hososhi. The Hososhi was a figure of awe. He wore a mask with 4 golden eyes, representing his ability to see demons in all 4 directions. He dressed in red and black robes and carried a spear and a shield. He did not look like a human. He looked like a greater demon fighting lesser demons. The Hososhi would lead a procession of courtiers, chanting loudly, striking the air with weapons to drive the invisible Oni of plague out of the palace gates. They would shout, "Oni Yarao!" Drive out the demons. It was a noisy, violent, and theatrical purging of the capital. The belief was that the Oni were drawn to the stagnation of the old year, and they had to be physically pushed out to make room for the purity of the new year. As the centuries passed and the imperial power waned, the Tsuina ritual filtered down from the aristocracy to the common people. It evolved. The terrifying 4-eyed Hososhi faded from memory, replaced by the head of the household. The spear and shield were replaced by a weapon that was humble, abundant, and spiritually potent: the soybean. This is the ritual of mamamaki, bean throwing, which is still performed in millions of Japanese homes today. But why beans? In Japanese spiritual thought, grains and seeds are vessels of life force. They contain the energy of growth, the power of the sun and the earth condensed into a tiny, hard pellet. Soybeans, in particular, were seen as possessing the power to crush evil spirits. There is also a classic Japanese wordplay at work here, a kotodama, or spirit of language. The word for bean is mame. This sounds identical to the word for demon eye, ma-me. Thus, throwing a bean at an oni is symbolically destroying the demon's eye, blinding it and robbing it of its power. Another interpretation is ma-metsu, meaning destroying the demon. The ritual of mamemaki is simple, but profoundly atmospheric. On the night of Setsubun, usually February 3rd, the father of the family, or a Toshiotoko, a man born in the zodiac animal year of the current year, dons an oni mask. He plays the role of the intruder, the winter spirit trying to breach the sanctity of the home. The rest of the family, often the children, take handfuls of roasted soybeans, fukumame, or fortune beans. They throw the beans at the oni, shouting the ancient incantation, "Oni wa soto, fuku wa uchi." Demons out, luck in. The beans strike the mask with a satisfying clatter. The oni feigns pain and flees out the door into the cold night. The door is then slammed shut immediately to prevent the spirit from re-entering. It is a ritual drama, a domestic exorcism where the family asserts their dominion over their own space. But the defense does not end with the beans. The oni are persistent. They may linger at the threshold, waiting for a moment of weakness. To ensure they stay away, the Japanese employ a sensory weapon, the hiragi iwashi. This is a talisman made of a branch of holly, hiragi, and the dried head of a sardine, iwashi. It is stuck into the door frame of the house entrance. The logic is brutal and sensory. The holly leaves are sharp and thorny. They are meant to prick the eye of the oni if it tries to peer inside. The sardine head, when dried, emits a strong, pungent, fishy odor. In Japanese folklore, despite their terrifying appearance, oni are often depicted as having sensitive senses. They detest strong smells, much like vampires and garlic. The stench of the sardine is so offensive to the oni that they will turn away in disgust. Thus, the entrance is guarded by pain, the thorns, and revulsion, the smell. It is a primitive but effective biological barrier. In recent times, another custom has been added to Setsubun, the ehomaki. This is a thick sushi roll, eaten in absolute silence, while facing the lucky direction of the year, determined by the zodiac. While less about fighting demons and more about inviting luck, it fits the theme of filling the body with good fortune after the demons have been expelled. The persistence of Setsubun into the modern technological age is a testament to the deep-seated nature of the Oni myth. We may live in apartments with steel doors and electronic locks, but we still feel the need to throw beans at the invisible shadows. We still feel the ancient rhythm of the seasons, the danger of the gap between winter and spring. When you hold a roasted soybean in your hand on Setsubun, you are holding a weapon that has been used for 1,000 years. You are standing in a line of warriors, priests, and fathers who have all stood at the threshold of their homes, facing the dark and shouting, "You are not welcome here." But as we drive the Oni out, a question lingers. Are they truly, purely evil? If they are the mirrors of our own hearts, can they be redeemed? Are there Oni who do not destroy, but protect? As the beans scatter across the floor, we must look at the exceptions to the rule. We must look at the Oni who converted. We have spent much of our journey huddled around the fire, looking out into the dark with fearful eyes, waiting for the red skin and the iron club to emerge from the shadows. We have learned to throw beans at them, to drive them away with the smell of burning sardines, and to dread the northeast direction from which they come. The Oni, in the collective imagination, is the ultimate adversary. It is the chaos that threatens the order of the rice field and the sanctity of the home. But Japanese mythology is rarely so binary. In a land of 8 million gods, the line between a monster and a guardian is often a matter of perspective. If you look closely at the rooftops of traditional Japanese houses, or walk the steep paths of the sacred mountains, you will find a startling contradiction. The same face that torments sinners in hell is also the face that protects the innocent on earth. Let us look up. High above the eaves of temples and old mansions, staring down with bulging eyes and bared fangs, are the onigawara. These are the ogre tiles, gargoyles made of clay and fired in kilns until they are as hard as stone. They depict the terrifying visage of the Oni, the horns, the scowl, the wild hair. But they are not there to threaten the people inside. They are there to threaten the other evils. This is the principle of poison fighting poison. Doku wo mote, doku wo seisu. In the spiritual logic of Japan, a gentle spirit may not be strong enough to repel a plague or a curse. To fight a demon, you need a bigger demon. The onigawara serves as a spiritual scarecrow. When a wandering spirit of sickness or misfortune approaches the house and sees the fierce face of the Oni on the roof, it flees in terror. The monster has become the watchdog. The grimace that frightens us is the same grimace that keeps us safe. This transformation from enemy to ally is most famously embodied in the legend of En no Ozunu, the founder of Shugendo, the way of ascetic power. En no Ozunu was a mystic who lived in the 7th century, a man who walked the razor's edge between the human and spirit worlds. It is said that through his immense spiritual power, he subdued 2 terrifying demons who dwelled in the Ikoma Mountains, Zenki and Goki. Zenki, the anterior demon, was red, representing the active masculine principle. Goki, the posterior demon, was blue, representing the passive feminine principle. Originally, they were child-eating monsters, the terror of the region. But En no Ozunu did not kill them. He captured their children, hiding them in an iron pot to teach the demons the pain of loss. Overcome with grief and realizing the suffering they had caused, Zenki and Goki submitted to the mystic. They did not just surrender, they converted. They became his fiercely loyal servants. In art, you will often see En no Ozunu sitting calmly, flanked by these two demons. Zenki wields an axe to clear the path through the wilderness, and Goki carries a water vessel to quench the master's thirst. They represent the wild forces of nature, fire and water, aggression and stillness, tamed by wisdom. They became the ancestors of the Gokuraji community in Yoshino, where villagers to this day claim descent from these converted demons. Here, the Oni is not an outcast. He is a patriarch. We also see the guardian Oni in the strange and raucous festivals of rural Japan, most notably the Namahage of Akita Prefecture. On New Year's Eve, men from the village don grotesque Oni masks and straw raincoats. They carry wooden knives and buckets. They storm into the houses of the community, roaring, stomping, and shouting, "Are there any crybabies here? Are there any lazy children who don't listen to their parents?" To a small child, this is a moment of pure terror. The monster has entered the home. But notice the dynamic. The parents welcome the Namahage. They offer them sake and rice cakes. They treat them as honored guests. Why? Because the Namahage are not evil spirits. They are Toshigami, deities of the incoming year. Their terrifying behavior is a ritual cleansing. By scaring the children into obedience and stripping away the laziness of the household, they ensure a year of health and diligence. The fear they inspire is a constructive fear. It is the thunder that brings the rain. Perhaps the most poignant story of the good Oni is a modern fable that has become as beloved as any ancient myth. Naita Aka Oni, or the Red Oni Who Cried. The story tells of a red Oni who lived in the mountains but longed to be friends with the humans in the village below. He was kind and gentle, but every time he approached the village, the people screamed and ran away, terrified of his red skin and horns. Heartbroken, the red Oni wrote a sign. Home of a gentle Oni, tasty tea and cakes available. All are welcome. But still, no one came. They thought it was a trap. His friend, the Blue Oni, saw his despair and devised a plan. "I will go to the village and rampage," the Blue Oni said. "I will scare the humans. Then you will come and chase me away. You will save them. Then they will trust you." The Red Oni refused at first, not wanting to hurt his friend, but the Blue Oni insisted. They enacted the drama. The Blue Oni roared and smashed fences. The Red Oni charged in, shouting, "Stop this!" and struck his friend lightly, but it looked real. The Blue Oni fled. The villagers, amazed, embraced the Red Oni. "You are our hero," they cried. The Red Oni finally had what he wanted. He played with the children, drank tea with the elders, and lived in happiness. But as time passed, he realized he hadn't seen the Blue Oni. Worried, he went to the Blue Oni's cave. The cave was empty. The door was barred. Taped to the door was a letter. My dear Red Oni, if I stay here, the humans will realize our trick and they will stop trusting you. So I am going away on a long journey. I will never return. Please remain friends with the humans. I will always be proud of you. Your friend, the Blue Oni. The Red Oni read the letter. He realized the price of his happiness. The Blue Oni had sacrificed his home, his reputation, and his only friendship so that the Red Oni could belong. And there, alone in the mountains, the Red Oni cried. This story, though simple, captures the tragedy at the heart of the Oni archetype. They are beings of immense emotion. They are capable of great cruelty, yes, but also of great sacrifice. The Blue Oni in the story is the ultimate guardian. He protects the happiness of his friend by becoming the villain. So, when we look at the Oni, we must be careful not to judge by the horns alone. Sometimes, the monster at the gate is the only thing standing between us and the dark. Sometimes the demon is the only one who cares enough to weep. But there is one place where the emotion of the Oni is captured not in stories, but in wood. One place where the complexity of the demon, the rage, the sorrow, the jealousy, and the power is frozen in time. We must leave the mountains and enter the quiet, hallowed space of the No Theater. We must look upon the mask. The stage is made of polished cypress wood, gleaming under the lights. In the background, a single pine tree is painted on a wooden panel. There are no elaborate sets, no special effects. The air is thick with the silence of anticipation. A flute begins to play, a high, piercing sound that seems to tear the fabric of the air. A drum beats, a slow, hypnotic rhythm that mimics the heartbeat of the earth. An actor glides onto the stage. He moves with a surreal slowness, his feet sliding across the floor in a movement called suriashi. He wears magnificent robes of gold and crimson brocade. But you do not look at his robes. You look at his face. Or rather, you look at the face that has been carved for him. It is a face of white skin, golden eyes, and two curved horns. It is a face that is screaming in silence. It is the Hannya. In the world of No Theater, the mask is not a disguise. It is a possession. The carver does not simply shape wood. They excavate a soul from a block of hinoki, Japanese cypress. And of all the masks in the No repertoire, none is as complex, as terrifying, or as beautiful as the masks of the Oni. The term Oni mask is a broad category, but in No, it is divided into specific emotional archetypes. The most famous is the Hannya. We spoke earlier of the Hashihime, the jealous woman at the bridge. The Hannya is the face of that woman. But look closer at the mask. It is a miracle of optical illusion and psychological depth. When the actor tilts his head forward, a movement called kumorasu, clouding, the mask appears to look down. The shadows shift. The furrowed brows cast darkness over the eyes. The mouth, which is wide open, seems to close slightly. In this position, the Hannya looks undeniably sad. It is the face of a woman weeping for a lost love, tortured by her own inadequacy. It captures the yin aspect of the demon, the sorrow that precedes the rage. But then, the actor tilts his head back, a movement called terasu, shining. The light catches the gold-plated eyes. The mouth seems to open wider, revealing the tongue and the fangs. The sorrow vanishes, replaced by a rictus of pure, unadulterated fury. It is the face of the predator about to strike. This duality, sorrow and rage existing on the same piece of wood, is the genius of the Hannya. It tells us that the Oni is not a static monster. It is a fluid state of emotional agony. The horns are not just weapons. They are the physical manifestation of pain, pushing its way out of the skull. The disheveled hair painted on the sides of the mask represents the loss of social control. The Hannya is the face of human dignity unraveling. There are actually 3 stages of this mask, representing the progression of the demon. 1. Namanari, the becoming demon. This mask has small horns and looks almost human. It represents a woman who is just beginning to turn, who still has a shred of humanity left. 2. Chunari, the middle demon. The horns are longer, the expression more savage. The magic is taking hold. 3. Honari, the true demon. This is the full Hannya, the serpentine, irrevocable monster. There is no going back. But the Hannya is the female demon. What of the male? For the brute force of the mountain gods and the earth spiders, No uses a different mask, the Shikami and the Beshimi. The Shikami mask is the face of the Tsuchigumo, earth spider, or the raging Oni lord. Unlike the Hannya, which has a tragic elegance, the Shikami is grotesque power. The brow is deeply furrowed, crunched into a permanent scowl of aggression. The teeth are bared, the fangs prominent. It captures the raw, masculine violence of the Araburu Kami. It is the face of the earthquake, the face of the landslide. When an actor wears the Shikami, he often wears a massive red or white wig that he whips around in a frenzy, symbolizing the chaotic energy of the wild. The Beshimi is even more unsettling. Its mouth is clamped shut firmly. Beshimu means to press the lips together. The eyes are wide and bulging. This is the face of suppressed power, of strain, of an Oni holding back an immense force, or perhaps enduring immense pain. It is often used for Tengu, or other fierce non-human entities. The creation of these masks is a spiritual discipline. A master carver will sit with a block of cypress for days before making the first cut. They are not creating a face. They are finding the face that is already hiding inside the wood. They use ancient tools, chisels and gouges, to peel away the layers. They apply layers of gofun, crushed seashell powder mixed with glue, to create the skin texture. They paint the features with mineral pigments. For the actor, putting on the mask is a ritual of transformation. In the mirror room, Kagami Noma, behind the stage, the actor sits before a mirror. He looks at his own human face. Then he looks at the mask. He brings the mask to his face, and in that moment, the human disappears. The Ma, the space between the actor's face and the mask, is where the spirit of the Oni enters. The actor sees the world through tiny eye holes, his vision restricted, his breathing echoing inside the wood. He becomes the vessel. The No theater teaches us that the Oni is not just a monster to be killed. It is an emotion to be experienced. When we watch the Hannya dance, we are not just afraid. We are moved. We recognize the jealousy. We recognize the anger. We realize that the mask is not alien. It is a reflection of the darkest parts of ourselves, carved in wood and gilded in gold. The mask freezes the fleeting moment of transformation. It captures the exact second when love turns to hate, when man turns to beast. And in that frozen scream, we find a strange kind of beauty, the beauty of absolute, terrifying truth. But all plays must end. The actor removes the mask. The lights dim. The Oni returns to its wooden box, wrapped in silk. We must step out of the theater and back into the modern world. We must ask ourselves, where have the Oni gone? Have they vanished with the samurai and the sorcerers? Or have they simply changed their masks again? The curtain falls on the No stage. The flute's piercing cry fades into silence. The actor removes the Hannya mask, wiping the sweat from his brow, revealing the human face beneath. We step out of the theater and into the blinding neon glare of modern Tokyo. The wooden pillars of the Heian Palace are gone, replaced by steel skyscrapers that scrape the belly of the clouds. The dark, treacherous roads of the mountains are now paved highways, illuminated by artificial suns. The silence of the ancient night, where the Ma once thrived, has been banished by the hum of electricity and the endless stream of data. And yet, if you listen closely to the rhythm of this new world, you will hear a familiar heartbeat. The Oni has not vanished. It has adapted. In the shifting landscape of the 21st century, the ancient demons of Japan have achieved the ultimate survival strategy. They have become ubiquitous. The transformation began long before the invention of the microchip. In the Edo period, artists like Toriyama Sekien took the terrifying creatures of folklore and pinned them down with ink. By cataloging the monsters in his Gazu Hyaki Yagyo, the illustrated night parade of 100 demons, he began the process of taming them. The Oni moved from being a source of existential dread to a subject of curiosity and entertainment. They became characters in a grand national narrative, collectibles in the cabinet of the Japanese imagination. Today, you can find the Oni everywhere, but often in a guise that would baffle Minamoto no Raiko. Walk through the shopping streets of a hot spring town like Noboribetsu, and you will see giant statues of Oni welcoming tourists. These are not the hidden terrors of the Fudoki. They are mascots. They are Yuruchara, cute, softened versions of the monster designed to sell souvenirs and promote local pride. The Red Oni, once the embodiment of burning greed, is now a friendly figure holding a sign for a discount sale. The terrifying Namahage of Akita, who traumatized generations of children into obedience, are now cultural ambassadors, stamped on posters inviting people to visit the region. This mascotization of the Oni is a fascinating psychological defense mechanism. By turning the monster into a toy, by making it kawaii, cute, society exerts control over the uncontrollable. We shrink the giant down until it fits in our pocket. We laugh at the thing that used to eat us. It is the ultimate victory of the human spirit over its ancestral fears. But do not be deceived by the plush toys and the cartoon characters. The linguistic and cultural roots of the Oni remain deep and sharp. In the Japanese language itself, the word Oni has evolved to become a prefix for anything extreme, relentless, or beyond the norm. A strict, merciless teacher is called an Oni Kyokan, demon instructor. A game of tag is called Oni Gokko, Oni play, where the person who is it becomes the Oni, chasing the others. Even in slang, something that is incredibly good or intense can be described using Oni as an intensifier. The word has detached from the monster and become a descriptor of intensity itself. The Oni is no longer just a noun. It is an adjective for the limits of human endurance. Furthermore, the archetype of the Oni, the outsider, the misunderstood power, the tragic villain, dominates modern Japanese storytelling. While we must not mistake pop culture for mythology, we must recognize that the stories Japan tells itself today are echoes of the stories it told 1,000 years ago. When we see narratives about beings who are feared for their power, who are hunted by organizations of swordsmen, who struggle with their demonic nature while retaining their humanity, we are seeing the ghost of Shuten-doji. We are seeing the tears of the Red Oni who wanted a friend. The medium has changed from scroll to screen, but the myth remains the same. The Oni represents the other that lives inside us, the power that can destroy the world or save it, depending on whether it is accepted or rejected. The ritual of Setsubun, the bean-throwing festival, is perhaps the most enduring link. Every year, in millions of high-tech apartments and traditional homes alike, families still open their windows to the cold February air. Fathers still put on the plastic masks. Children still throw the roasted soybeans. Oni wa soto, fuku wa uchi. The belief in literal demons may have faded, but the need to ritually cleanse our lives of misfortune, to physically drive out the bad air of the past year, is as strong as ever. We still need the Oni to play the role of the antagonist, so that we can feel like the heroes of our own lives. As we stand at the end of this long journey, looking back at the mist-shrouded peaks of ancient Japan, we can finally answer the question, what is an Oni? An Oni is the shadow cast by the light of civilization. When humans built walls, the Oni was what lay outside them. When humans created laws, the Oni was the chaos that broke them. When humans defined humanity by politeness and restraint, the Oni became the embodiment of raw, unbridled emotion, rage, greed, jealousy, and hunger. They are the red and the blue currents that flow through our own veins. They are the terrifying ox-headed jailers who punish us when we betray our own morals. They are the weeping women on the bridge who loved too hard. They are the drunken kings on the mountain who refuse to bow to authority. The Oni will never truly die, because they are not separate from us. As long as there is a dark corner in the human heart, as long as there is a fear of the unknown, and as long as there is a need to name the chaos of the world, the Oni will be there. They are waiting in the mist, holding their iron clubs, reminding us that the boundary between the human and the monster is thinner than a sheet of paper. So, the next time you hear the wind howling from the northeast, or the next time you feel a sudden, inexplicable chill on a lonely road, do not be afraid. But do not be careless. Carry a soybean in your pocket. Keep your promises. And remember the stories. The fire in our hearth is dying down now. The shadows in the corners of the room are growing longer. It is time to rest. Thank you for walking this dark and ancient path with me. If you wish to hear more whispers from the old world, to explore the gods and monsters that shaped our history, please leave a like and subscribe to Hearths of Myths. There are many more stories waiting in the dark, and I would be honored to be your guide. Until next time, sleep well and keep the demons out.